For the purpose of this video, we will classify the pigments into strong tinting and weak tinting. Mostly the earth colors, such as most browns and grays, have a weak tinting property, whereas cadmiums found in other mediums have strong tinting properties. PanPastels do not use cadmiums, so there are no heavy tinting colors that excel that much over others. There are substitutes for cadmiums that have similar properties, such as these over here. This is important to know when layering one color on top of another. Contrary to other mediums, with the exception of watercolor, PanPastel is applied with very thin layers. As a result, the intermixing is different. Depending on the tinting power, you can only somewhat alter a previous layer. Maybe you have experience with stick pastels. With this medium, you have more leeway in the second layer because the film is not as thin. With the PanPastels, you will not be able to override the underneath color, rather influence the previous color. Once you become more acquainted with your PanPastels, you will become more familiarized with colors that can go on top and alter the previously painted layer. Let's see an example. As you can see, the layer is going on very thinly. I'm rubbing it into the paper, and of course for this reason PanPastels is quite cost effective. I'll take a new applicator and I'll drag it through this color. I know by experience that dairy dyed yellow is quite strong in its tinting power. So I can take some of that, and I know that I can go on top of that and somewhat influence the underneath layer, but you're not going to be able to override it as you would be able to do with other mediums. To a point you can override this previous layer, especially when it's dry. So you can see I can slightly change the color, and that's using a strong tinting color. Or for instance, I know that violet extra dark is also strong tinting, so I can go on that and I can darken this. But you can see that it doesn't respect its original value. It's somehow lightening by mixing in with the value under that. So it becomes a mid-dark value rather than a dark value. In case you decide to lighten a color, use titanium white as your last resource, for it will make the color become chalky unless it is a blue to indicate a sky. So if I put ultramarine blue here, that's sticking to the paper. I can use titanium white to a point and indicate like a hint of clouds, but as you can see, I'm completely losing my white properties of the pigment. So I'm just influencing the bottom layer, not actually overriding it. The best way, if you want to lighten a color, if you must use titanium white, put the titanium white on first, and then on top of that you add the ultramarine blue. If you need to lighten a color, let's say for instance burnt sienna, and we decide to go for a lighter color or lighter value than this, if I use white, it's going to get chalky. See, it loses its brilliance. So if I want to make a lighter orange or red orange than burnt sienna, then what I need to do is add, instead of adding white, look for pigments that are in the same family of hues. So for instance, if I want to make that lighter, then instead of taking white, I can either use that one, which is in the same family of hues, or even this one. So let's add that there. That's not really lightening it. So we use this pigment here. There you go. See, that's lightening it. And notice that we do not have a chalky color here compared to this one, because I used already a pigment within the same family of hues to lighten it. And the same thing would apply to darkening it as well. You look for the common hues. So if you want to darken, let's say this green over here, so instead of using black, which is the same idea behind using white, black's just going to make it go muddy, you can just look for a darker green within that family and use that to darken your green. To eliminate the risk of getting mud, or to avoid struggling adding highlights on top of a darker value, leave the blank paper for your highlights and juxtapose the lighter value next to the darker value. Then blend the two layers together. In this sense, plan ahead as if it were a watercolor. Let's look at an example of how I would apply this principle to a tree. So as you can see, I'm leaving the white paper here. You can blend between these two. That's much better than trying to put this highlight on top of that dark. So as you can see, I didn't fill up the whole area with that one dark color. Now, if you want, you can go back in and start to somewhat mix this in here. As we said, you cannot change a color or dramatically make a difference by putting a highlight on top of a dark. It's somewhat easier to put the darks into the highlights. You get less of a problem because you don't have to lighten the paint, you have to darken it. But you can get an intermediary mixture between these two. And as you can see, what I'm putting in here is influencing that previous layer. And there we have a tree. Take into account that another possibility, instead of insisting on trying to change the color underneath, what you can do is just erase a part of it. This is a medium that can be erased the easiest of them all. So I'm using a gum Arabic eraser. And I'm regaining that bald spot. And then if I want, I can go back in again and put some light on there, depending what I want to do.